it's almost like destiny when the flag ended up evolving to include anybody who identifies as a woman or a woman-aligned person and is attracted to women and woman-aligned people, or however you choose. If you identify as sapphic, basically, the flag is for you.
Content warnings for this episode include racism. Genderful would like to acknowledge the indigenous peoples and unceded lands that the producers, hosts, and guests live and have dwelt upon. Today we honor
Post Salish,
the Mohawk, Algonquin, and Anishinabewaki peoples.
And the Mi'kmaq, also known as Olnu.
We honor the elders, the human, plant, and animal ancestors of these lands, and celebrate the living descendants of these peoples. May all beings tend these lands for the goodness of the next 7 generations and beyond.
Howdy folks, welcome to Genderful, a talk show interviewing gender diverse people about their special interests. Hi, I'm GenderMeowster, and my pronouns are they, them.
Hi, I'm Miranda, and my pronouns are she, her.
The focus of our show is to interview trans, non-binary, agender, two-spirit, and gender diverse people regarding their special interests, passion projects, and resources for the gender diverse community.
We want our audience to know that we hold multiple diverse identities and bring these lenses to the show with our passion for telling our stories.
I identify as non-binary, transmasculine, polyamorous, ADHD, autistic, and disabled with chronic pain and mobility issues. I also am white and reside in the United States.
I identify as trans feminine, neurodivergent, queer, and a person of color residing in Canada. We invite you to remember that we are whole people with robust lives, friendships, challenges, and successes. We love and are loved, and we are delighted to share these stories with you.
As always, we kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of their identities. Your identities can change over time and are valid every step of the way. And if you think you're gender diverse, you are gender diverse. There's no social or medical prerequisite to be included in the community.
Welcome to Genderful Podcast, a show interviewing gender diverse people about their special interests. This week, our guest is Lydia-Isaac, they, them pronouns, and is chatting with us about the pride flag that they created. Lydia-Isaac is a Mi'kmaq two-spirit person who created a new pride flag in 2018 based off of a poem by the ancient Greek poet Sappho. Welcome to Genderful, Lydia-Isaac.
Thank you so much for having me. It was very exciting to be invited.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on. I'm sure going to have a lot of questions about your flag and about this poem, because I am a little bit of a nerd for Greek mythology and like ancient Greek history and stuff like that. So I actually have a copy of what are they called? Oh my God, I have a copy of Circe and the Song of Achilles on my bookshelf, which are 2 books I very highly recommend. They are, so Circe is my favorite. It is a reimagining of, so it's basically the story of, so Circe is like a character in the Odyssey. She's one of the people that Odysseus encounters, and it's telling the story from her perspective. And it's great. I loved it. It's so great. So
checking that off on my read list for sure.
Yes, so that's actually her
interesting.
second book. The author's name is, I'm blanking on her name right now. Her first book was The Song of Achilles.
I've read it.
If you like The Song of Achilles, you'll love Circe.
Good to know.
I like Circe more than Song of Achilles, although Song of Achilles is way more gay.
By nature of its subject matter.
Yes, of course. But we will get to that later. So we have a couple of questions that we like to ask all of our guests. The first one being, what might be the things that you can trace back to your youth that indicated you might be gender diverse one day?
This is something I tell a lot of people because it's like wild that I never knew back then that this would be like a red flag, that maybe something was different about me. But like, I had this neighbor at one point, and she was a very nice lady, but she was 100% convinced that I was a boy because of the way I dressed, because of the way I acted. I never corrected her. I grew up, I was assigned female at birth, and, I was raised as a young girl, but this woman identified me as a boy, and I never bothered correcting her because I liked it.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. It's, I'm sure a lot of people can identify with that experience. It's just like that, like recognition of like being identified as the gender you want to be identified as.
When you're a kid too, you
Mhm.
don't even really
Yeah.
conceptualize it. You just think, oh, that's cool. This woman thinks I'm a boy. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, and it's like not until later that you learn it's like, oh, I shouldn't have been doing that or whatever. Because I know that, like, I mean, I grew up during a time when like gender diversity was not super well accepted, and even at a young age, I kind of internalized it's like, oh, I'm not supposed to want to be a girl.
Hmm.
But when you get that acknowledgement, that freedom to express yourself at a young age, that it just pays dividends down the line. It does wonders for your own personal growth and your own personal happiness. Speaking of things down the line, how would you say your relationship to gender has evolved over time?
It's definitely coincide with my relationship to my indigeneity because my father is Mi'kmaq, but I used my white passing privilege growing up. My mother is of German descent to really hide that part of me because I didn't want people to bully me further. I mean, like,
Mm,
I was ridiculed for having, a father with visibly brown skin, and people would say, is that
mm,
your real father? I would wear seal gloves to school and be tortured by other children who thought that was the grossest thing in the world. Like, so from a very young age, I hid that part away from me.
mm,
And in learning in my early 20s how wrong that was on multiple levels, like hurting me, hurting my community, hurting everybody. So I, started to reconnect. And by reconnect, I mean like gain back what I threw away, basically. And it was a huge process. I still consider myself going through, like, it's something you learn every day. But part of that was also learning about two spirit identities and realizing how whole that made me feel. Like,
mm,
I first identified as a lesbian, and it fit, and non-binary, and it was like trying to conform into a box. And I still use non-binary to describe myself when explaining my two-spirit identity to people who don't quite understand how that
mm,
works. But primarily, the understanding of two-spirit and that connection to my ancestors and that role that means I must play in part of my community, it's including my indigeneity into my gender like that makes me feel like a whole person.
mm.
So, yeah.
No, that's really fantastic. I actually wanted to pull on that thread a little bit more because a lot of people listening may not be fully aware of what it is to be two spirits. So, what does being two spirit mean to you?
To me, it means, you know, that connection to your ancestors who felt the same way, and honoring them. Like, this is, of course, two spirit identities. There is no single identity. I mean, you have individual nations, thousands and thousands of them, and each of them had different rules and gender understandings. So I
Mhm.
just want to clarify, by me saying this, I am not saying that that's the umbrella
Yeah,
experience for
and
everybody.
that's why I was very clear asking that. What does it mean to
To
you?
me,
Yes.
I feel like when I identify as two spirit and talk to other two spirit peoples, I have a cousin who is also two spirit. Like, I feel as if my ancestors are also present with me, and I feel strength from that. And I feel like I want to honor the people that are coming after me too, to know that, like, this history and this culture is not lost. Like, I want
Mhm.
them to know that they are a whole person too. Like, I want them to not have to go through the same unfortunate suffering that I went through before I finally came upon this realization that there's nothing wrong with me.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's a long road for us. So for some of us
it
anyway,
is. I mean,
to realize that.
especially like
Mhm.
with, the two spirit identities, there's such a huge history that's, been pushed down and hidden
Mm.
for
Yeah.
so long because of colonization and the struggle to survive, to keep that identities, and other identities under that two spirit umbrella alive is, a huge undertaking that I feel like I get to be part of something special. So, yeah.
Mhm. No, that's fantastic, and I'm really glad that we had the chance to talk about that because I I'm not so fortunate in that I haven't really gotten to meet very many two-spirit people. So that's one of the best things about this job is I get to talk to so many different people and get to learn about all their different stories. So I really want to thank you for sharing your stories with us.
Aw.
Uh, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I learned about the concept of what Two Spirit was maybe like 6 years ago. So because like I always like saw it in the acronym, the LGBTQ2IA plus, right? And it's like, well, what's that two for? Well,
Mm.
and I had to actually like go out and find out about it, and it's not something that's like very frequently talked about, and I'm happy to give a platform to people to talk about that stuff because it is that intersection of gender identity and cultural identity is really really important.
Yeah, I mean, I first learned about it through a book. There's an elder, a local elder. His name was Daniel N. Paul, and he wrote a really great book called "We Were Not the Savages," and highly
Mm,
recommend it. And he did a like intro to another book specifically on gender and sexual diversity in the Mi'kmaq community. And the title is escaping me right now. I feel terrible about that, but Mi'kmaq Puowan is part of the title. And when I read that, it was like the world opened up to me.
awesome. Well, I would love to get into our special topic today, which is the making of the Sappho flag. So first of all, what were your motivations in creating this flag?
So, to be clear, this flag was created before there was a commonly used lesbian flag. It was created
Mm,
back when I identified as a lesbian, and I wanted to contribute to the effort to finding a flag that lesbians could use. So, its original ye olden days intent was just, something that lesbians of all diversity and inclusion could identify with. But it
mm.
evolved since then.
I was actually not aware of that because I mean I've seen a couple different lesbian flags. My favorite is the one with the battle axe. But yeah, it's that's interesting how it's kind of a recent development that kind of lesbians have their own flag. And I mean, I'll be honest, there's so many flags that like I can't remember most of them. But yeah, I think it is really important that each kind of subculture has a symbol they can rally behind. So I think that's a really great thing that that you're able to create that. Now maybe we've kind of talked about this already, but who would you say the Sappho flag is for? Or who did you intend it for?
Originally, I intended it for, lesbians or like, people who identified um, in Sapphism. But I also learned like Sapphism isn't just lesbianism,
Mm,
contrary to some people on the internet might say. Um, and so it's really nice. It's almost like destiny when the flag ended up evolving into something more
mm,
to include anybody, who identifies as a woman or a woman aligned person and is attracted to women and woman aligned people or, you know, whatnot, however you choose. If you identify as sapphic, basically, the flag is for you. It's you can choose to represent yourself with this.
aw. I love that because lesbian is like not a word I've really like identified with that much because I am attracted to women, but I'm also attracted to some subset of non-binary folks.
Yeah.
And I felt like even though like there's more than one definition of lesbian, but I felt like that word wasn't enough to encompass the kind of the totality of what I feel attracted to. And I feel like the word sapphic is a much better descriptor. So thank you for giving me this word.
Yeah. Sapphic and Achillean, I like those terms quite a lot.
Mm,
I think they, ring back to like as you said, I'm a Greek mythology nerd too, so there's that angle of it. But I also just I like the freedom of not having specifics. Yeah. So and
yeah,
not to say that, people who identify as lesbians can't be attracted to non-binary
of
folks
course.
as
Yeah.
well, you know, but like if you don't feel like you fit that bill, like there's other options out there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's like it's not prescriptive. It's not like, oh, you
Yeah.
identify as this, and it's like that this is how you must be. It's like, no, these are just labels that help us kind of navigate our own sexuality or our own gender diversity. So I mean, I've always used the word queer because of how non-specific it is. It's
Hmm.
just like, well, I'm queer. And then if you really want to know, you have to ask me additional questions. But I think Sapphic does a really good job of kind of describing, what it is I was going for. But yeah, this actually it's not on my list of questions, but I want to get right into the Greek mythology stuff. So tell us about this poem by Sappho. Tell us about Sappho. Tell me everything. I want to know everything.
So Sappho is, a very famous ancient Greek poet who, through her poetry, we know was attracted to women. There's a lot of arguments whether she was bisexual, lesbian. I don't think it's appropriate to put a label on somebody of that time because there was
Mhm.
very different views on gender and sexuality, period. Uh, that's besides the point. The point is we know that she wrote these beautiful pieces about her love for another woman, and the fact that they were preserved all this time to show us today that even our ancestors all around the world experienced the same things that we're experiencing, is very beautiful. And there's one poem in particular where she describes the flowers and the plants that decorate her lover. And that is the poem that really spoke to me because I could
Oh,
envision it so perfectly in my mind what she was describing. And the colors just came to me through the descriptors of this poem. And so I picked the colors by the different flowers, the dill, the whatever, whatnot. Yeah.
mm. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Oh, I'm getting all the warm fuzzies right now. So this flag originally was a lesbian flag. So how did that evolve to its broader like sapphic meaning? Like how did you
Yeah.
get from point A to point B there?
I wish I could give you a clear-cut timeline, but it kind of just happened with the will of the internet. It gained the nickname the Sappho flag because of its source from the poem, which
Mhm.
when I shared the flag, I, of course, shared its history and like how I came to come up with this design and included the poem in it. And then that, of course, translated to, well, Sapphism, of course, encompasses more than just lesbianism. It's anybody who is attracted to women and women aligned folks. And somebody made a TikTok at some point where they were discussing like lesser known flags, and they included the flag design that I made, and they called it the
Aw.
Sapphic flag. And I think that was a big turning point because suddenly I saw other people using this flag that I made that
Mm.
kind of disappeared, and then it came back, and I thought, well, I have a different relationship with that identity now myself. I no longer identify as a lesbian, but I still identify as sapphic. So
Mm.
it worked out well that this flag had a journey parallel to my own.
That actually covers the next question I had was
Oh,
how does it, how do you what relation do you personally have to it? But I think you've already done a great job of answering that question. So
I relate to
uh,
that though. Like I identified as like a non-binary lesbian for a long time. And so it's like, am I really a lesbian? Because I'm like not a girl TM, but also not a boy, question marks. Ooh. So
yeah.
I love that the the sapphic flag can be more about like it's more about attraction than like specifically one's body configuration or like,
mhm.
Yes, exactly. At
it's
least
more
that was
trans
my
inclusive,
hope.
it feels like. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah, because I
More two
mean,
spirit in betweener, not here, not there person
exactly.
inclusive.
Yeah. Definitely
Yeah,
had some
that's
influence in that mindset.
I
absolutely,
love
it's so
that.
poetic. And yeah, like personally, like that's like
Literally.
Well, I mean, first, because like, I mean, I've always been attracted to women, but like, I don't necessarily care like what chromosomes they have or how they present. I mean, it's just like, are you a woman? Are you feminine? 'Cause that's what I'm into, right? Um, and it's nice to have a word for that.
Yeah. And, I think from what I understand of, ancient Greek times, I think they had a very similar viewpoint in like, how do you describe femininity today versus then? I mean,
Mhm.
like, people like people who identified as men would wear makeup, like that was fine. But
Yeah,
like, and yeah.
yeah, and it's
Today femininity is associated with like hyper makeup and everything, but and men can't touch that. And it's interesting to see how that changed over time. So like if you're trying to
mhm.
apply these historical lenses, you might as well do it like keeping in mind that you're doing it from present times perspective.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Exactly. And our current perspective, it's not even a global perspective. It's a very much like
Yes.
it's very much like a Western, Judeo-Christian perspective, and different parts of the world have other differing perspectives on that. And this idea that like, oh, this is how it's always been. It's like, no, like, it's these sorts of attitudes have changed over time and they change across different cultures.
Yeah.
So,
Like long
yeah, and
hair. Like I grew up around men with long
mhm,
hair. Like this
mhm.
just normal. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
then to a lot of, white settlers, that's very weird to them.
mhm, mhm. And just this idea that like, oh, this like gender diversity or sexual diversity is a new thing that's like, oh, this is like, the Western contamination, or it's just a bunch of nonsense because it's always existed. We've always been here. I mean, you look at these old Greek myths, they're gay as heck. They're gay as
Yes.
heck if you read the Iliad or the Odyssey or any, they're so gay.
So gay. True.
Hello.
If you're just tuning in, we're here with Lydia-Isaac, they, them pronouns, and we're talking about pride flags. So, other than the one that you created,
Specifically, this cool one that you made.
yes,
It's so
though
cool.
you can see it on the screen
It's on
there.
screen. I forgot to tell you all. And then when it's just Lydia-Isaac talking, it's your entire background. So it's like this giant glorious
Yes.
cloak that you're wearing of like lesbian sapphic joy. So
If
good.
you're listening to us in the future in podcast form, none of this means anything to you, but check the show notes and you'll be able to find a picture of it.
Maybe we could do a verbal description of the flag. Would you feel comfortable doing that for us,
Oh,
Lydia
yeah,
Isaac?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let me bring it up so I actually have a proper description. Um, if you hang on a sec,
It is indeed so pretty.
Mm.
I should have been prepared for this.
No, it's
I
okay.
kind of want one now.
We surprised you with this.
Yeah, so the top is a violety purple, the second is a nice pink, the third is yellow, and then the bottom is green. And so each of those colors represent a different flower, and then the green is dill. And I'll just remind you that those different flowers came from the poem that Sappho wrote about her love, draped in this flower crown. And it represents sapphic love, fragility, strength, and healing, which is also coinciding with the different meanings of those plants. So, yeah.
Aw. What are the other
It's
plans?
it's so good.
The plants, a crocus flower, um, a rose, what is, yeah, the crocus flower, the rose, dill is green, and then uh, rose, violets. Yes, of course, violets.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause yeah, why did I miss violet? Yes.
I love that. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Violets, rosebuds, dill, and crocuses. And if you'll just give me a second, I can actually quote the poem. It's all the violet tiaras, braided rosebuds, dill, and crocus twined around your young neck.
Aw.
That's the passage. Yeah.
Oh, it's so sweet. I'm in love with this. So yeah, other than this incredible flag, what are your favorite pride flags?
So I really like the standard rainbow flag because I
Mhm.
love the sense of unity it gives to the community. And other than that one, I also really like this is a very specific flag that not many people would recognize outside of Atlantic Canada, but the Wabanaki Two Spirit Alliance flag
Oh,
features a Mi'kmaq hieroglyph of the plural form of spirit. And so um, Two Spirit basically on top of a standard rainbow background, but it's pulling from these hieroglyphs that the people of ancient times would carve into rocks and use as communications. So,
oh wow,
yeah,
cool. There's so many flags, and they're all like awesome in their own way.
they do, and they
Yeah.
bring like they bring joy, and it's nice knowing that people can unify under something. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, because I may be divesting some of my personal politics here, but I'm not a fan of flags in general, like national flags. But I adore pride flags. I make the exception there. I was like, yes, I stand behind this. Like, give me all the pride flags. Mm. uh,
because I mean, like, not to get into personal politics, but
yes.
I would not weep tears if Canada dissolved.
Mm.
I am an Indigenous person, and Canada is built on top of my people's
Yes.
land. So,
Yes.
um, I don't relate
And
to the Canadian flag. That flag doesn't represent me, but I do feel
mm,
represented by a rainbow flag or by a Sapphic
mm.
flag. So,
Yeah, and that's part of the reason we do our land acknowledgement at the start is we acknowledge that these are unceded lands. Like that's not just a catchphrase. It's
mm,
true. So I'm a first generation immigrant, so like I don't have that like generational baggage that comes from colonialism, but I still benefit from the colonial system, just living here and not being marginalized in that particular way. So that's why I
mm.
think that even though my ancestors didn't participate in the colonization of these lands, I still benefit from it, and it's still worth acknowledging that. On a lighter note,
Yes.
um, have you thought about creating or redesigning any other pride flags?
It's not really something that's crossed my mind particularly just because I don't have that personal motivation anymore. I feel like
Hmm.
I've done my job with this one.
Hmm.
Um, but the other thing I will warn people who might think about this, be prepared for some unfortunate political baggage of people trying to um, put words into your mouth, assume
Yeah.
things about you,
Yeah.
because you've created this thing and they want it to fit their own imagination. And, I understand that when you put something out onto the internet, it can take a life of its own. You only have so
Hmm.
much control over it. And so just be wary of that. And that's not something I really feel like dealing with at this point
Oh, that's totally fair.
anymore. Like, you got to pick your battles.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Maybe if I rephrase this question, is there is there a community that you feel is underserved by the lack of a pride flag, or
Mm.
maybe or could use a redesign on their pride flag? Maybe not you personally needs to do it, but are there any?
I would like to see a
Mm,
different two spirit pride flag rather than just a rainbow with a feather on it. Um, because for one thing, as far as I'm aware, that flag might not have been even created by an indigenous person. I'm pretty sure it was just somebody on DeviantArt who designed this and it caught on. Now, don't quote me on that. I might be wrong. I would have to do some further investigation on it.
yes,
I don't
yes.
want to discredit somebody without proper um eh, knowledge, but
Hmm.
it was very suspect when I found the origins of this commonly used flag. And I think that
Hmm.
it's a flag, if it was to catch on and be an umbrella two spirit flag, should be made by a two spirit person.
Yeah, no, I
um
agree with that because I mean, it's basically just the rainbow flag with a little thing tacked onto it.
yeah,
It's not
and
really designed from the ground up.
no, I would like something a bit more original, something that's easier to reproduce too, like something
Hmm.
like that is easily recognizable from a distance, like, and something not too busy either. Like there is another one that it's a two-spirit flag. I mean, it's got a very intricate design though, and I find that's not easily reproduced. And I think that's something you got to
Mhm.
keep in mind when you're making a flag.
Yeah. Then that's actually a great segue into our next question here is we kind of got into this a little bit already, but do you have any advice to gender or sexual diverse folks who would want to design a new pride flag?
Yeah, so like I just said, I think accessibility is something you really have to keep at the forefront of your mind, not just in how it's going to be reproduced, but how it's going to be viewed, you know? Like you don't want to blend too many similar colors together. Um, you don't want to choose colors that aren't web safe. And by web safe, I mean colors that are going to look the same on any monitor, any internet connection, something that's easily recognizable. And that's one of the reasons why I chose this specific hues for the colors that I made in the Sappho
Mm.
Flag. Um, Another thing to consider is you want to, in my opinion, make it easy to add the progress triangle in the corner if people want to do that. So I really like the option of having that divided line in the center so the triangle can come at a perfect peak.
Mm.
That's just aesthetic choice on my part, though, but it's something to think about. If you have too many colors, too many stripes, then it's going to take away from that progress triangle that people
Yeah.
might want to include.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Exactly.
the third thing, don't just focus on aesthetics. Like, this is something that, it might catch on, in which case people are going to be look for meaning behind it. I mean, the Gilbert Baker Pride Progress flag, I mean, it has meaning behind every single color. Like the choices weren't just, well, this looks pretty, like
Hmm.
there was background choices made, what each represents. And so if you want it to catch, like if it's going to catch on, it should have meaning behind it. Like, what is the message that you were trying to get across? Who are you trying to include? And by
Hmm.
including them, what are you telling them, inviting them to use your flag for? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because maybe not a lot of not maybe not everyone knows this, but even on the the quote unquote traditional pride flag, each one of those colors has a specific meaning associated with it. Don't ask me to tell you what those are because I don't know off the top of my head,
Oh,
but I
either.
know that they have me. I know they have them. Now we
I,
actually in house
I
we
have
designed a
I have
progress flag. Master,
excited
do you want to tell us about that?
I have excited info dump for you both. So, Lydia-Isaac, you just mentioned the Gilbert Baker Pride Progress flag. Did you know that we created that here? That was
No, I
us.
didn't. Oh my gosh.
As far as I know, we're the only people with merch about it so far.
It's
Um,
beautiful.
this is a cat hug sticker that I'm holding up to the camera. It's got so the Gilbert Baker Pride Progress takes the original 8 stripes of the Gilbert Baker flag from 1978 and combines it with Pride Progress 2.0, which has the intersex inclusion in addition to trans and BIPOC stripes in the chevron on the left. It also fixes the part where the chevron was not pointed at the middle because that was super annoying. So it's like lined up correctly. And we made this. Mirami and I were doing a search on the interwebs, and I was like, wait, how does this flag not exist yet? Like, this is such an obvious thing because it's reaching back to the ancestors of like Gilbert Baker and the original, like, let's make a flag about identities of folks. And then thinking forward about what's the most inclusive version of like the Pride Progress that includes, as many of the identities as possible, which is why it has the intersex inclusion instead of just BIPOC and trans, which is 1.0, is it doesn't have intersex in it. So it was very hard to squish onto this little kitty heart and get all 8 of the stripes with the
Yeah, I mean,
chevron and
there's a
all the
lot
stuff.
going on that
But we
flag.
did it. It took us like hours. But yeah, we made that. That was us. Like
That
we
is
looked
a
everywhere.
huge thing to
We
be proud
published it
of.
on the thing. It was so cool and I
Mhm.
love it. I really want to see if we could figure out how to print it and have it for sale at Trans Pride next year. Because I just think that'd be cool. So I actually have an ask out to Black queer flag makers to see if they can make it happen. Because also you have to think about who's supplying your stuff, and I don't want
Mm.
random white people who are cis het to be getting our monies.
Or
Yeah, no, that makes
Redbubble or
sense.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So trying to be mindful with our suppliers and stuff because it's nice to keep our money in the broader 2S LGBTQA plus community. Anyways, yeah, we mirrored that. That was me and Mirami
That's
sitting around
amazing.
little guys.
Oh, that's great.
I just
I'm going to bring
I'm
us
just
back on
happily
topic.
gonna hold the
I'm
sticker.
going to do our best to actually end the show on time.
Imagine us
We
ending the
have
show
a
on
couple
time.
concluding
Incredible.
questions that we ask all of our guests. But first of all, is there anything that we missed about the Sappho flag or just flag making in general that you'd like to make sure that you say?
I do just want to narrow home that while it did start off as a lesbian flag, it is not um, within that box anymore. It has evolved. I want
Mm,
it open to, if you like this flag, if you feel like this flag touches you and represents you, it is yours, like do with it what you want. I have no patent or whatever on it. I
mm.
don't care if people want to print it or, replicate it or do whatever. I'm glad it's out there for people to use. Yeah.
Awesome. So this next question is actually my favorite question because in our current day and age, unfortunately, gender diverse and sexually diverse people are often framed in our negative experiences and our pain and our suffering and our tragedies. I think it's far more important that we share our joy. Can you share an experience that you've had with gender euphoria?
I certainly can. I'm very happy to say that I received my top surgery just this February, and
Congratulations.
I know it was life changing. And when I looked at myself in the mirror the first time, the best way I can describe it is feeling like I was fully present. I was for the first time fully present in my body, and that's the most euphoric I've ever felt, I think. Like,
Oh,
and I'm just still riding that high today. So.
oh, I love that for you. That's so wonderful. It's we hear that from like so many people that's go through gender affirming care and yeah can like not necessarily for everyone but for the people that does make a difference to it makes a huge difference. And Master will be the first person here to tell you about how much gender affirming surgeries have changed their life. So I don't want to put you on the spot because you're pushing buttons, but if you'd like to chime in, feel free.
Oh yeah. I mean, the whole reason I started Gender Federation is because I know how life-changing and life-saving trans care can be. And so I made a stream team that fundraises so that people can get their surgeries because it's not always financially accessible to us. And like justifying all that stuff to your insurance company, like is a lot. And it doesn't cover a bunch of other things like your time off work. And if you need a caregiver because you don't have access to your like ancestral wealth and community, like there are some ways that being queer is so isolating and like,
Mhm.
you know, if you have to pay for that community to be healthy and safe, like one, that is so sad and painful to even sit with, but also like the least we can do as like I'm using queers expansively as like all of the alphabet soup friends. Like as queers on the internet, we can be there like in spirit and with our wallets, like if we can't be there in person. And so I'm very passionate about gender federation. Ha ha ha.
Yay.
Yeah.
And finally, what would you like to make sure folks know about your perspective on gender and non-binary trans and or gender diverse issues?
I have a very firm stance that racism and transphobia are intrinsically linked.
Mm,
Gender conformity has always
Mhm.
been a colonial settler enforced set of rules. And those
mhm.
rules have especially been against Indigenous and Black folks to try and control us. I mean, and when we talk about gender nonconformity, we need to remember that, like you said, earlier, there are different cultural understandings of gender. And to erase that is not just transphobia, it is racism.
Mm.
Yeah, we're in full agreement there. Lydia-Isaac, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. You were absolute pleasure. Lydia-Isaac is a two-spirit Mi'kmaq person with too many opinions. You can find them on a Tumblr at, you can find the link there in the chat as well as in the show notes if you're listening to this in the future. And here is this week's Clouder query that you, our audience, can answer on our social media platforms.
Yes, so I wrote it down. Why do we care about pride flags? Why do we seek representation in a flag?
Awesome. All right. So coming soon. So next week there will be no Genderful, but on October 30th, our guest will be Ilara Stefania Godeg. They them pronouns will be discussing their experience with magic, spirituality, and disability. Very apropos for the day before Halloween. It's
And the day
boo
before
scary
Samhain.
Season. Hooray. I'm gonna wear my my fun ghost leggings.
Oh,
Nice. I will just continue being a witch. That's my plan. All right, awesome. I can do the next little bit.
Sure.
Genderful would like to thank all of our supporters on Patreon: Holly Blash, Winter Vespers, Loch Ness Gamer, Justin Baker Rojas, Sandra Mickelborg, Yaicio, Ray of Swords, Sherry Keller, Mirami, the Hessian, and Trans Capybara. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks everyone for tuning in.
We'll see you on the next episode.
Next time on the Genderful Podcast.
Genderful would like to thank our guest for being on this podcast. If you'd like to catch us live, join us on Mondays on twitch.tv/GenderMeowster. Show notes will appear in the edited versions of the show on Fridays on both YouTube and podcasting platforms.
If you have a question you'd like the host to answer or are gender diverse and would like to request an interview, please send an email to genderfulpodcast@gmail.com or sign up via the website at genderfulpodcast.com.
As a gender diverse community, the Clouder wants to assure our listeners that we are prepared to moderate our spaces. We will get positive and negative feedback on these shows and topics, and we have a moderation team on our channels, socials, and Discord server ready to deal with this.
Please join our Discord server at discord.gg/meowster to meet the community and get a regular digest of solidarity resources. You can also support us with subscriptions on Patreon, following and reviewing us on your favorite podcasting platform, or engaging with our posts and content on social media at GenderfulPod and at GenderMeowster.
You can take a few minutes to rate the show. We will post any 5-star reviews on our socials, so get creative. Mention a special interest of your own, a project you're working on, or even say hi to your comfort person in your review. What power!
This show is made possible by volunteers, tips, and subscriptions. Shout out to the folks helping us coordinate guests, edit the podcast, moderate the live chat, and post on our socials.
Here's our artist credit. Genderful is hosted by Miranda Katita and GenderMeowster. Genderful's pre-show is wrangled by JuiceTex. Genderful's live stream is produced by Mirami. Genderful is edited and mixed by Transgriffin and FreeRangeMegs. Genderful's promos and thumbnail graphic are designed by Transgriffin. Genderful's social media is managed by Kainsey. Genderful's theme song is called Hope by FreeRangeMegs, also known as Soma. The current GenderMeowster logo was designed by Siptopia. Genderful is the intellectual property of GenderMeowster. All rights reserved. Trans rights are human rights. That's right.